There are moments in life when the very things we believe define us, money, status, and power, can blind us to what truly matters. Anna, the wife of a wealthy millionaire, lived for the thrill of asserting her superiority. The story opens in the grand halls of Charles and Anna's luxurious mansion, a space brimming with wealth and opulence, reflecting Anna's desire to flaunt her status. Anna, the wife of a successful millionaire, had grown accustomed to living in splendor. Everything about her life screamed wealth. Every room in her vast house was adorned with the finest furnishings, and every car she owned was a symbol of affluence. But behind all the glitter and glam, there was an unsettling emptiness that even her wealth couldn't fill. Anna's days were spent maintaining her image, attending high society gatherings, and mingling with people who echoed her same disdain for the less fortunate. Despite her privileged lifestyle, she always seemed to need more attention, more recognition, more reasons to assert her dominance. This relentless hunger turned her into a woman who found pleasure in making others feel small, a habit that Charles couldn't ignore any longer. Charles, in contrast, was a man of substance and humility. He had risen from humble beginnings, driven by a mind full of aspirations, to build the empire that now supported their extravagant lifestyle. He valued hard work, respect, and integrity. To him, true wealth wasn't measured by the number of cars parked in the driveway or the grandeur of his house, but by the richness of one's character. When he first met Anna, he was captivated by her beauty and confidence, believing that beneath her sharp exterior there was a compassionate woman waiting to be nurtured. For years, he had convinced himself that she would change, that his love and patience would help her see the world through his eyes. Yet, as time passed, Anna's haughty demeanor only grew worse, overshadowing any glimpse of the woman he had fallen for. Every snide remark she made, every demeaning glance she threw was like a splinter, driving deeper into the fragile remnants of their relationship. One morning, as Anna prepared for another day of indulgence, she glanced at her reflection in the massive mirror that covered an entire wall of their bedroom. Dressed in the latest designer fashion, dripping with expensive jewelry, she looked every bit the millionaire's wife, but there was no warmth in her eyes, only the cold gleam of someone constantly on guard, ready to judge and be judged. Her face, though flawless, was tight with bitterness. For Anna, wealth was not just a possession, it was her armor, her shield against the world, and like any armor, it isolated her, making her untouchable yet incredibly lonely. As she stepped out of her apartment and slid into the back seat of her chauffeur-driven car, she barely noticed Charles's concerned gaze from the balcony above. He sighed, wondering if the woman he once knew was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of pride and vanity. Their marriage, which had begun with such promise and excitement, was now filled with a quiet, relentless tension. Charles, ever the hopeful optimist, had tried countless times to bridge the gap between them. He took her on lavish vacations, bought her everything money could buy, and even showered her with the type of attention any woman would dream of. Yet none of it seemed to matter. Anna's attitude remained the same. It was as if every gesture of kindness was met with a wall of indifference. The wealth that once brought them together was now the very thing pulling them apart. Deep down, Charles began to see that the problem wasn't about money, status, or even their apartment that overlooked the glittering city skyline. It was Anna's mindset, a mindset that saw people as tools, as objects to be used and discarded. Things took a turn for the worse one afternoon when Anna decided to go shopping at one of the city's busiest markets. Despite her preference for high-end boutiques, she sometimes visited the bustling open markets to revel in the spectacle of being noticed by the masses. As she walked through the crowded stalls, her diamond-studded heels clicking against the uneven pavement, people's eyes followed her, a mix of awe and unease. Vendors called out to her, hoping for a sale, but she brushed them off, her head held high. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air as she approached a small, modest stall at the end of the market. There, standing amidst a sea of vibrant roses and lilies, was a frail, old woman. Her clothes were worn and patched, a stark contrast to the glamorous figure standing before her. Anna's lips curled in a sneer as she looked the woman up and down, the thrill of superiority coursing through her veins. Such a pathetic setup, Anna murmured under her breath, loud enough for the vendor to hear. The old woman glanced up, her face etched with lines that spoke of a lifetime of hardships. Despite her weathered appearance, there was a quiet dignity in the way she stood, a dignity that seemed to challenge Anna's arrogance. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the woman said softly, holding out a single rose, its petals bright and beautiful. "Would you like to buy a flower today?" Anna's eyes narrowed, taking in the woman's tired smile. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. A woman like her, with an apartment full of rare orchids and exotic blooms, being offered a single rose from a shabby stall. The thought was almost too amusing. But more than that, it was an opportunity, a chance to assert her wealth and remind this woman of her place. "Buy a flower?" Anna echoed, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do I look like someone who needs to buy anything from you?" The old woman didn't flinch. She merely lowered her hand, the rose still held delicately between her fingers. "Sometimes a simple flower can bring more joy than all the riches in the world," she replied quietly. The calmness in her voice only fueled Anna's irritation. "Spare me your philosophies," Anna snapped, her eyes flashing. "People like you should stick to selling flowers and leave the real business to those who understand the value of wealth." A few passers-by glanced over, sensing the tension. The old woman's smile never wavered, but there was a sadness in her gaze as she looked at Anna. It was as if she could see right through the facade of luxury, straight to the hollow core beneath. Unbeknownst to Anna, someone else was watching too, someone who knew both women very well. Charles stood a short distance away, his heart heavy as he witnessed the scene unfold. He had come to the market on a whim, hoping to pick up a few things for dinner, but what he saw now made his stomach churn. There, standing in front of the humble flower stall, was his wife, berating a woman who deserved nothing but respect. Because this was no ordinary vendor, this was his mother, Margaret, his mother who had chosen a life of simplicity over the trappings of wealth, who had raised him to value kindness and humility above all else. Margaret, who had taught him that true wealth wasn't about money or status, but about the richness of the heart. Seeing Anna, the woman he had once loved, treating his mother with such contempt was like a punch to the gut. Charles's eyes burned with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to step in, to stop Anna's cruel words, but a part of him hesitated. What would it accomplish? Anna wouldn't listen. She never did. But then, as Anna laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the market, something inside him snapped. He couldn't stand by and let this continue. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding as he moved forward, his gaze fixed on Anna's face. This was it. This was the moment he could no longer ignore who she had become. A woman blinded by pride, consumed by a need to assert her wealth and status, even at the cost of hurting those who deserved better. And as he stepped between his wife and his mother, he knew that this confrontation was long overdue. "Anna!" he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. The sound cut through the air like a knife, causing Anna to whirl around, her expression one of pure surprise. She hadn't expected to see her husband here, and certainly not in this context. Her smile faltered as she saw the look on his face. Anger, disappointment, and something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. "Charles, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone softer, almost unsure. Charles didn't answer immediately. He turned to Margaret, his gaze softening. "Are you all right, Mom?" he asked gently, his words a stark contrast to the tension in the air. Anna's eyes widened in shock. "Mom?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. This couldn't be. This old woman, the vendor she had just humiliated, was his mother. Anna's heart raced as she stood there, frozen, staring at Margaret in disbelief. Her mind struggled to process the revelation, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. How could this shabby old flower vendor be Charles's mother? The woman who stood before her now, dressed in plain, modest clothing, her hands worn and calloused, was nothing like the image of wealth and sophistication Anna had envisioned for her husband's family. Panic flickered in her chest, but she quickly squashed it, forcing herself to maintain her composure. I didn't know," she stammered, desperately searching Charles's face for a sign of leniency, but there was none. His expression remained stony, his eyes fixed on hers with a coldness she had never seen before. Around them the crowd seemed to close in, watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and shock. Charles took a step forward, his jaw clenched tightly. "You didn't know because you never cared to know, Anna," he said quietly, his voice carrying an edge that sent chills down her spine. "I've told you about my family, about my mother, but you never listened." His words cut through her like a blade, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. For years, she had dismissed his stories, too caught up in her own world to pay attention. And now, it was coming back to haunt her. "Charles, please," she murmured, reaching out to touch his arm, but he pulled away sharply, the rejection stinging like a slap. "I didn't mean any harm," she insisted, her voice wavering. "I thought she was just another vendor." The moment the words left her mouth, she realized her mistake. Charles's eyes flared with anger, his hands curling into fists. "Just another vendor," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Is that what people are to you, Anna? Just faceless, nameless bodies beneath your notice?" Anna flinched, the raw fury in his tone unlike anything she had ever heard before. This was no longer just about her insulting his mother. It was about everything. Every cruel remark, every haughty glance, every time she had dismissed someone as unworthy of her time or attention. All the resentment he had kept buried for years was boiling to the surface, and there was no way to stop it. "You've always looked down on others, always judged people by their appearance, their wealth," Charles continued, his voice rising with each word. "But do you know what real wealth is, Anna? It's kindness. It's humility. It's having the decency to treat people with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." The words hit Anna like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Around them, the market had gone eerily silent, the vendors and shoppers watching with bated breath. Margaret stood quietly to the side, her face calm, but there was a sadness in her eyes as she looked at Anna, a sadness that made Anna's throat tighten painfully. "Charles, she began, but he shook his head, cutting her off. "No, Anna, this is exactly who you are," he said harshly. "You've never seen people for who they really are. To you, they're just props, tools to make you feel superior." His words were a brutal reflection of the truth, and Anna felt herself shrinking under the weight of them. For so long, she had believed that wealth and status were the ultimate markers of success, the only things that mattered. But standing there now, in the middle of a crowded market, stripped of her usual defenses, she felt small and insignificant. Her gaze darted to Margaret, who was watching her with an expression that was both pitying and forgiving. The sight made Anna's chest tighten with shame. How could she have been so blind, so consumed by her own vanity, that she had failed to see the humanity in others? "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible, but Charles only shook his head again, his eyes hard. "Sorry won't change what you've done, Anna," he said quietly. "It won't erase the years of cruelty, the people you've hurt." His gaze flickered to Margaret, then back to Anna. "And it certainly won't make up for how you just treated my mother." The silence that followed was deafening, each second stretching painfully as Anna struggled to find something, anything that would make this right. But what could she say? What excuse could possibly justify her behavior? The answer was painfully clear. There was none. For the first time in her life, Anna felt utterly powerless, her wealth and status meaningless in the face of Charles's condemnation. The realization left her breathless, a hollow ache blooming in her chest. Margaret stepped forward then, placing a gentle hand on Charles's arm. "Charles, please," she murmured softly. "Let's not do this here." Her voice was gentle, full of the compassion that Anna had so sorely lacked. "I'm all right, truly. There's no need for this to become more than it already is." But Charles shook his head, his jaw set in a hard line. "No, Mom," he said firmly. "This isn't just about today. It's about everything." His gaze shifted back to Anna, a mixture of anger and sorrow swirling in his eyes. "All these years I've watched you tear people down, belittle them," he said quietly. "And I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just a part of who you were. But I can't ignore it anymore, Anna. Not when it's my own mother you're treating like she's nothing." The pain in his voice made Anna's chest tighten painfully, a lump forming in her throat. She had never seen him like this before, so angry, so disappointed. It was as if the man standing before her was a stranger, someone she had never truly known. And maybe she hadn't. Maybe she had been so caught up in her own world, her own ambitions, that she had never really seen him for who he was. The thought was terrifying, and for the first time, Anna felt the sharp sting of regret. "Charles, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can change. I'll be different. Just give me a chance." But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The damage was done. Years of arrogance and cruelty couldn't be undone with a few words. Charles's expression softened slightly, but there was no forgiveness in his gaze. "I don't know if you can, Anna," he said quietly. "I don't even know if you want to." His words were like a knife to the gut, and Anna felt herself reeling. "I do," she insisted, her voice breaking. "I swear, I do." But Charles just looked at her sadly, shaking his head. "Then prove it," he said softly. "Prove it to yourself, not to me." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Anna standing alone in the middle of the market, her world crumbling around her. Margaret lingered for a moment, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and understanding. "People can change, Anna," she murmured quietly, "but it takes time. And it takes humility." With those parting words, she turned and followed her son, leaving Anna staring after them, her heart aching with a pain she didn't know how to name. As the crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring softly amongst themselves, Anna felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, suffocating her. For the first time in her life, she felt exposed, truly exposed, and it terrified her. All the wealth, all the luxury, the house, the apartment, the cars, it all felt so hollow now. What was the point of it all if she had lost the one thing that truly mattered, the one person who had seen something good in her, even when she had failed to see it herself? With a shuddering breath, Anna turned and stumbled away, her mind spinning. She had to fix this, she had to make things right. But where could she even begin? How did you undo years of damage, of selfishness and cruelty? The question haunted her as she walked aimlessly through the market, her once proud posture sagging with the weight of her guilt. She had always thought that money and status were the keys to happiness, that having more would make her life complete. But standing there now, alone and broken, she realized how wrong she had been. Wealth couldn't buy forgiveness, money couldn't erase the past, and status couldn't make people love you. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but as the truth sank in, Anna knew that this was only the beginning. "Prove it to yourself, not to me." Charles's words echoed in her mind, filling the empty spaces where her pride and arrogance had once resided. Could she really change? Did she even have the strength to try? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. If she didn't, she would lose the only chance she had left to redeem herself. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Anna straightened her shoulders, wiping away the tears that had begun to blur her vision. This was it. This was her moment of reckoning, and for the first time, she was going to face it head-on. No more hiding behind wealth and status. No more excuses. If she was going to change, it had to start now, and it had to start with her. Charles's heart was pounding as he stormed out of the market, his mother following close behind. The confrontation with Anna had left him shaken, his emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of anger, sorrow, and disappointment. He had tried for so long to look past her flaws, to believe that deep down there was a compassionate person hiding beneath all the vanity and cruelty. But after today, he wasn't sure he could keep lying to himself. The image of Anna sneering at his mother, of her cold, dismissive words, played over and over in his mind like a broken record. "Charles, slow down," Margaret called softly, her voice a gentle plea amidst the whirlwind of his thoughts. He stopped abruptly, turning to face her, his expression twisted with anguish. "How could she do that, Mom?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "How could she treat you like that?" Margaret sighed, reaching up to cup his cheek with a hand that was rough from years of hard work. "People see what they want to see, Charles," she said quietly, "and sometimes they're so blinded by what they think they know that they can't see the truth even when it's right in front of them." Her words were soft, but they struck a chord deep within him, resonating with a painful truth he didn't want to admit. He had known who Anna was for a long time, had seen the way she treated people, the way she belittled those she deemed beneath her, but he had ignored it, brushing it off as a byproduct of her upbringing, her environment. He had convinced himself that she would change, that his love and patience would be enough to bring out the good he had believed was buried somewhere within her, but today had shattered that illusion. "It's not just her fault," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "It's mine too. I let this go on for too long." Margaret's gaze softened, her eyes filled with understanding. "We can't change the past, son," she murmured, "but we can decide what to do from here." Charles closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. What did he want to do? What was there to do? Walking away from Anna, ending their marriage. It seemed unthinkable, but staying, pretending that things could go back to how they were, felt impossible. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice raw with pain. Margaret sighed softly, her hand dropping to her side. "You'll figure it out," she said quietly. "Just remember, you deserve to be happy, Charles, and so does she." Her words lingered in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Charles turned away, his mind spinning. Happiness. When was the last time he had truly been happy? He couldn't remember. His life with Anna had been one of constant tension, each day a struggle to bridge the growing chasm between them. He had tried so hard to be the husband she wanted, to mold himself into someone who fit her vision of success. But in the process, he had lost himself. And now, standing in the middle of the crowded market, with his mother's quiet strength beside him, he realized that something had to change. Taking a deep breath, he turned to face Margaret again, his expression resolute. "I'm going to talk to her," he said firmly. "One last time." Margaret nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "Do what you need to do, son," she murmured. "But remember, she has to want to change. You can't do it for her." Charles nodded, her words echoing in his mind as he made his way back toward the market. His heart pounded with a mixture of determination and dread. He didn't know what he was going to say to Anna, didn't even know if she would listen, but he had to try, for both their sakes. As he approached the flower stall again, he saw Anna standing alone, her posture stiff and defensive. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the weight of what had just happened was finally starting to sink in. For a moment, he hesitated, watching her from a distance. Then, squaring his shoulders, he stepped forward. "Anna," he called softly. She turned sharply, her eyes wide with surprise. "Charles," she breathed, relief flooding her expression. "I'm so glad you came back. But he held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not here to argue," he said quietly. I need to know something." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What?" she asked cautiously. Charles took a deep breath, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "Do you even want to change, Anna?" The question seemed to catch her off guard, and for a moment she just stared at him, speechless. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Charles shook his head slowly, his gaze never wavering. "Do you want to change?" he repeated softly. "Because if you don't, if you're just saying what you think I want to hear, then there's no point in any of this." Anna's mouth opened and closed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to change, Charles. I don't even know where to start." The admission sent a pang through his chest, and he closed his eyes briefly, pain coursing through him. "That's not good enough," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "If you don't want to change for yourself, then nothing I do will matter." Anna took a step back, her expression crumbling. "But I do want to change," she insisted desperately. "I swear I do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it." But Charles just shook his head, his gaze full of sorrow. "I can't tell you that, Anna," he said softly. "You have to figure it out on your own." The words seemed to hang in the air between them, heavy and final. Anna's shoulders slumped, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "So what does that mean?" she whispered. "Are you leaving me?" Charles hesitated, the question tearing at his heart. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." The raw honesty in his voice sent a shiver down Anna's spine, and for the first time, she felt the true weight of what she was about to lose. It wasn't just their marriage on the line. It was everything. All the years they had spent together, all the dreams they had shared, the life they had built, and it was slipping through her fingers, crumbling beneath the force of her own pride and stubbornness. "I love you, Charles," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you." His expression softened, but there was no relief in his gaze. "I love you too," he said quietly. "But love isn't enough, Anna. Not when it's built on a foundation of arrogance and cruelty." The words were like a knife to the heart, and Anna flinched, tears spilling over her cheeks. "So what do I do?" she pleaded. "How do I fix this?" Charles looked at her sadly, shaking his head. "I don't know," he murmured, "but you have to start by looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Anna standing alone, her world unraveling around her. She watched him go, her heart aching with a pain so deep it felt like it would swallow her whole. As Charles walked away, Anna felt the weight of her world crashing down around her. She stood there numb, watching his silhouette grow smaller until it disappeared into the sea of people. The tears that had threatened to spill finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks unchecked. For a moment, she felt utterly lost, like a child abandoned in a foreign land. She had never been good at apologizing, at admitting when she was wrong. Her whole life, she had built walls around herself, walls made of pride, arrogance, and the belief that wealth could shield her from the ugliness of the world. But now those walls were crumbling, and she was left with nothing but the raw, aching realization that everything she had ever believed was a lie. Slowly, almost mechanically, Anna turned and began to walk. She moved through the market like a ghost, her once haughty posture now hunched with defeat. The vendors who had watched the confrontation unfold looked away as she passed, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. She barely noticed them, her mind swirling with Charles's words. You have to start by looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself. But what did that even mean? How was she supposed to change when she didn't know who she was anymore? Her identity had always been wrapped up in her wealth, her status, her power. Without those things, what was left? The question gnawed at her, filling her with a deep, unrelenting sense of dread. Hours passed in a blur as Anna wandered aimlessly through the city. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets as the vibrant hustle of the market gave way to the quieter hum of the evening. She found herself standing in front of a small park, the sound of children's laughter drifting through the air. For a moment she just stood there, watching the scene with a strange sense of detachment. Families gathered on the grass, sharing picnics and laughter. Parents pushed their children on swings, their faces glowing with joy. It was a simple, unassuming happiness, one that Anna had never understood. Her life had always been about the next big thing, the next achievement, the next status symbol. But looking at these families now, she realized how empty her victories had been. Taking a deep breath, Anna sank onto a bench, her gaze fixed on a little girl who was chasing after a butterfly. The child's laughter rang out pure and unrestrained, and something inside Anna twisted painfully. When had she lost that? The ability to find joy in the small things, to laugh without care, to live without the constant pressure to prove herself. As she sat there, watching the girl dart across the grass, Anna felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for her to find that again. But it would take more than just words. It would take action, real, tangible change, and she had no idea where to start. "Excuse me, miss." A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Anna blinked, looking up to see a middle-aged woman standing beside the bench, a concerned expression on her face. "Are you all right?" the woman asked gently. Anna opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Was she all right? No. She wasn't. She was a mess, a broken, lost shell of the woman she had once been. But as she looked into the stranger's kind eyes, something inside her shifted. "No," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "No, I'm not." The woman nodded slowly, as if she understood more than Anna could put into words. "Do you need someone to talk to?" she offered softly. For a moment Anna hesitated. She had never been one to confide in strangers, but right now, she had no one else. "Yes," she breathed, surprising even herself. The woman smiled gently, taking a seat beside her. "I'm Sarah," she introduced herself. "What's your name?" Anna swallowed hard, the simple question making her throat tighten painfully. "Anna," she murmured. "My name is Anna." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, her gaze warm and steady. "It's nice to meet you, Anna." They sat in silence for a moment, the evening breeze rustling the leaves overhead. Anna took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady herself. I did something terrible today," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I hurt someone I care about, someone who means everything to me." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She just listened, her expression patient and non-judgmental. "It sounds like you're carrying a lot of guilt," she said softly. The words struck Anna like a physical blow, and she felt a sob rising in her chest. "I am," she choked out. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if I can." Sarah reached out, placing a gentle hand on Anna's shoulder. "Sometimes the first step to healing is admitting that we were wrong," she said quietly. "It's not easy, but it's the only way forward." Anna closed her eyes, the truth of Sarah's words settling deep in her heart. She had been wrong about so many things, and now she had to face the consequences. "What if it's too late?" she whispered, her voice small and broken. "What if I've already lost everything?" Sarah's grip tightened slightly, a comforting presence amidst the chaos of Anna's emotions. "It's never too late to change," she murmured, "but you have to want it, truly want it, and be willing to put in the work." The words echoed Charles's own, and for a moment Anna felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Determination. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe she could still fix this, but it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. Taking a deep breath, Anna looked up, meeting Sarah's gaze with a newfound resolve. "Thank you," she whispered. I think I need to start over." Sarah smiled gently, her eyes soft with understanding. "Starting over doesn't mean erasing the past," she said softly. "It means learning from it, becoming someone better because of it." Anna nodded slowly, the words sinking in. Maybe that was what Charles had meant. Maybe that was the real challenge. Not just saying she would change, but actually doing it, proving it, not just to him, but to herself. Standing up, Anna took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of hope. She turned to Sarah, a small, tentative smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she repeated softly. "You've helped more than you know." Sarah returned the smile, her gaze gentle. "Good luck, Anna," she murmured. With one last look at the park, Anna turned and walked away, her steps steady and sure. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, but she knew one thing for certain. She was going to find a way to be better, to be the kind of person Charles could be proud of. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to repair the damage she had done. Time passed slowly for Anna, each day blending into the next, as she grappled with the consequences of her actions. After that fateful encounter in the market, Charles had filed for divorce, severing the last ties that bound them together. For weeks, Anna had wallowed in grief, the silence of her once grand house echoing with memories of what could have been. The luxury that had once brought her pride now felt like a heavy burden, suffocating her under its weight. The cars in the driveway, the elegant apartment downtown, none of it mattered anymore. Stripped of her status and privilege, Anna found herself alone, staring at the ruins of the life she had built on arrogance and greed. But deep down, she knew that this was her chance, a chance to rebuild, not the life she had lost, but the person she had become. She started small, volunteering at local charities, immersing herself in the world she had once looked down upon. At first, the people were wary, skeptical of her sudden change of heart. They knew who she was, what she had been. The gossip about her fall from grace had spread like wildfire, and her presence was met with cold stares and whispers behind her back. But Anna didn't let it deter her. Each day, she showed up, ready to work, ready to prove, both to them and to herself, that she was more than the sum of her mistakes. She scrubbed floors, served meals, and cleaned up after events without a word of complaint. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, people began to warm up to her. They saw her dedication, her humility. They saw the tears she tried so hard to hide, the moments of quiet vulnerability when she thought no one was watching. One evening, as she was stacking chairs after a long day at the community center, a soft voice broke the silence. "You're really something, you know that?" Anna looked up, startled to see a tall man leaning against the doorway, his eyes warm with admiration. His name was David, a long-time volunteer at the center. He had watched her struggle, watched her push herself, watched her fall and get back up again. And in her perseverance, he saw something he hadn't expected: hope. They began talking that night, sharing stories long after the last of the volunteers had gone home. For the first time in ages, Anna felt a flicker of connection. David didn't judge her for her past, didn't look at her with the pitying disdain she had grown accustomed to. He saw her for who she was now, someone who was trying, someone who was hurting, someone who was changing. Their friendship blossomed slowly, each conversation a balm to the scars on her heart. David was everything Anna had never appreciated before: kind, patient, content with the simple things in life. He drove an old beat-up car, lived in a modest house, and had never cared much for the trappings of wealth. But he was rich in a way that Anna had never understood. His laughter was genuine, his smiles unburdened by the need to impress. Being around him was like stepping into a different world, a world where people were valued for who they were, not what they owned. And for the first time, Anna found herself wanting to belong. With David's encouragement, she continued her work at the community center, taking on more responsibilities, building relationships with the people she had once dismissed. She learned their names, their stories, their struggles. Slowly but surely, the woman she had been, the cold, haughty wife of a millionaire, faded away, replaced by someone new, someone softer, someone stronger. One afternoon, as she was packing up after a particularly busy event, David approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I think you've found your place here." Anna looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. David smiled gently, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I mean, I see the way people look at you now," he murmured. "They respect you. They trust you. You've earned that, Anna." The words sent a warm glow spreading through her chest, and she felt her eyes sting with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. David shook his head, his smile soft and unwavering. "No," he said firmly. "You did this yourself. I was just lucky enough to be here to see it happen." The truth of his words struck her, and for the first time, Anna felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the empty, shallow pride of flaunting wealth or status, but the quiet, solid pride of knowing she had made a difference, of knowing she had earned her place, not through power or money, but through kindness and hard work. And as she stood there, staring into David's eyes, she realized that this simple, honest life was more fulfilling than all the riches in the world. But there was one thing left to do, one last piece of her past she needed to confront before she could truly move forward. Months passed before Anna found the courage to reach out to Charles. By then, he had remarried, a kind-hearted woman named Sophie, whose gentle nature was the polar opposite of the woman Anna used to be. They had built a life together, one filled with love and mutual respect. When Anna finally saw him again, it was at a charity event for underprivileged children. He was standing with Sophie, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, his smile warm and genuine. For a moment, Anna hesitated, uncertainty clawing at her heart. What could she possibly say to him? What right did she have to intrude on the happiness he had found? But then Charles glanced up and their eyes met. There was no anger in his gaze, no bitterness, only a quiet, calm understanding. Taking a deep breath, Anna walked over, her heart pounding. "Hello, Charles," she murmured softly. He smiled gently, inclining his head. "Hello, Anna." The words felt strange on her tongue. So simple, so normal, and yet so weighted with unspoken emotion. She began, but he held up a hand, his gaze kind. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. "I can see it." Anna blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "See what?" she whispered. Charles's smile widened slightly, a hint of the man she had once known shining through. "You've changed," he murmured. "I always hoped you would." The words brought a lump to her throat, and she had to swallow hard to keep the tears at bay. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to see." He nodded slowly, his gaze soft. "We all have our own journeys," he said gently, "and I'm glad you found your way." With a small, bittersweet smile, Anna turned to leave, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. As she walked away, she glanced back one last time, her heart full. Charles was watching her, his expression serene, and beside him Sophie smiled, her presence a quiet testament to the happiness he had found. Anna felt a rush of gratitude, not for what she had lost, but for what she had learned. Because in the end, it wasn't about wealth or status or power. It was about love, kindness, and the courage to change. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free, truly free. Have you ever experienced a moment when life unexpectedly showed you the true value of humility? How did it change you? What would you have done in Anna's shoes? Would you have been able to admit your mistakes? Let's discuss it in the comments below. If you've ever been judged by your appearance or status, Share your story. How did you overcome it? Did you find that people's true worth can't be measured by material things? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you never miss out on these captivating stories that dive deep into human experiences, transformation, and the surprising twists that life throws our way. Stay tuned for more inspiring content.